high fuel price will affect the cost of living, and there are fears it will also have a knock-on effect on the property market. One strategist says consumers will cut spending, and this may affect shopping centres as well. For more on this, we're joined by John Loos from First National Bank. He joins us virtually. Mr. Loos, thank you very much for your time. Now, of course, I mean, for instance, with me, I will cut down on my shopping. I will cut down on how many times I go to a restaurant, etc., and rather cook at home to save money. So I'm guessing this is, this is why you have come to this conclusion.
Yes, there's always a reprioritization of expenditure. For many people, they can't avoid a lot of the fuel costs, daily commuting and so on. And so what do you cut? You can't cut essential items such as food and groceries. You cut more the luxuries, whether it be the movies or the eating out. And also postponable essential items such as clothing and footwear. So I think that there's a reprioritization, possibly partly away from that, more focused on essentials, and that plays into the hands more of small shopping centres, neighbourhood shopping centres, which concentrate much more on grocery shopping and food shopping. That'll be less affected. And more affected, I think, the bigger shopping centres potentially, where there's more dependence on entertainment and eating out and clothing and footwear shopping, fashion, and a lot more luxury shopping.
And also, I'm assuming there'll be a few people who might ask, their bosses if they could start working from home or continue back to level 5 of the lockdown kind of life.
Yes, so there's a portion of the workforce that can obviously work from home. They're in the office space. And predominantly, and already a lot are working far more from home than was the case prior to COVID. And I think that's a permanent arrangement. But for those at the office, I think you may see even more working from home than would otherwise be the case, in an attempt to cut down on the commuting bills where it's possible, and the petrol bills. So that poses something of an additional threat to office space, because I think a lot of companies at the moment might be considering, given that we've normalized office activity and there's a lot of empty office space that's still it's tenanted, but it's not being utilized on a daily basis. If that low occupation, daily occupation increases because of fuel prices, that can just put additional pressure on or influence on companies to possibly downscale on their office space requirements, some companies. So it can put additional pressure on the office property market, which already has a very high vacancy rate.
Speaking of property, just to go back to that point, are you seeing any possibility of, property in terms of houses, buyers and sellers and that type of thing also being affected by the fuel price hike?
Well, I mean, I think in that the fuel price, I mean, the big influence obviously is that interest rates have already been rising. The fuel price hikes to date already have been a significant influence in that, driving up CPI inflation and helping to convince the SARB to start hiking interest rates. And that started to slow both residential demand already has started to slow after quite a surge in demand after the 2020 rate cuts. So that's sort of reversing. And even on the commercial property side too, I think that further interest rate hiking, which we do expect, will start in the second half of the year to curb buyer demand in the commercial property space as well. So the interest rate impact on these highly credit-dependent buying markets, I think, does have a negative impact too. And indirectly, fuel price hikes are part of that because they add to CPI inflation.
I mean, this is kind of reminding me of what happened around the world between December of 2007 and sometime in 2009, 2008 being our worst, with Eskom also giving us load shedding worse than in 2008, etc. And now this also happening. Just tell me, Mr. Loos, are we in a recession? Are we there now?
We don't believe we're in a recession yet, but, certainly there's always a recession risk when oil price shocks hit the world, because the world's biggest fuel guzzling economy, traditionally the US, and the biggest economy in the world, often goes into a recession. We saw that in 1974, we saw that in 1980, and in 2008, it was an oil price shock, which I think was a big contributor. It wasn't just about Lehman Brothers collapse. There was a big oil price shock, $150 a barrel, and that helped the U.S. and into a recession and the world into a recession. So it's not out of the question, but it's probably too early to call that type of, it is a risk. Brent crude is at $120-something a barrel. It's not at the 150 of 2008. But should it carry on this path, oil traditionally can slow the world economy and our economy as a result very significantly.
Shoo. Well, thank you very much for speaking to us here on All Angles, Mr. Loos. That was Mr. Loos. He is from F&B.